This is an introduction for anyone who has not seen simplifying fractions in a while, or perhaps has never seen it before. Now, the basic idea of simplifying fractions is relatively straightforward. And the best way to think about it is a classic, let's cut the cake and eat some of it example. So, we have a cake, we cut it into quarters, and I eat 2 of the quarters. Now, I could go around all day saying I've had 2 quarters of cake, but quite frankly, I'd be much more likely to say I had half the cake. And as you can see, 2 quarters or a half actually are the exact same amount of that cake. The reason we would probably rather use 1/2 is because we're much more comfortable thinking about half of something than a quarter of something. The difference becomes much more apparent if I'm talking about 52/100ths. It'd be much nicer just thinking about quarters in that situation. Okay? So what we have to do is we need to get a method that means we can take the complicated fraction and simplify it down into the easiest equivalent fraction that we can. So I want to have a quick look at this example with our 2 quarters and our half. Now what you might notice is both 2 and 4 are in the 1 times table. They're also in the 2 times table. There is no other times table that has both 2 and 4. And what this means is we can essentially divide the top and the bottom of our fraction by 2. So that means that instead of having 2 pieces coloured in, we're only going to have 1 piece coloured in. And instead of the original 4 pieces we had, we are only going to have 2. So 2 divided by 2, 1, 4 divided by 2, 2, and that is essentially the same as if I took my rubber and I rubbed out that middle line there. Our 2 pieces have become 1 big piece, and our 4 pieces have become 2 bigger pieces. I'll just draw that back in for the moment. Okay, so here's our method. What times table are they both in? Divide by it, see where that takes you. So let's have a look at, say, this fraction. So we have 8 out of 20. Example 1. So what times table are 8 and 20 both in? Well, they're both in the 1 times table, but we ignore that one, because if we divide by 1, we're just going to get the same thing. They're both in the 2 times table. They're not in the 3 times table. They are in the 4 times table. They're not in the 5. They're not in the 6. They're not in the 7. Now, 8's in the 8 times table. 20 is not. So we look at our little list and we see that the biggest number we could find was 4. So we're going to divide by 4, divide by 4. 8 divided by 4, 2. 20 divided by 4, 5. And then we have to do a very important check and we say, well, 2 and 5, is there a times table other than 1 that they're both in? Nope. So we are done. Let's have a look at another example. So we're going to look at 6 out of 21. Are there any times tables that are just jumping out to you there? Well, they're in the 1, they're not in the 2, they're in the 3, 4, 5, not in those, 6. Well, 6 is, but 21 is not. So here we actually only have 2 factors, 2 things that fit into them both. So we go for the 3, the big one. We divide by 3, and we get 2 out of 7. And again, we check. Is there a times table with both 2 and 7? Because we might have missed something. But our answer is no, and we are done. We are going to have a look now at the one I said earlier. So we already know the answer to it theoretically. If you remember what I said, we've got 50 out of 200. Now, this is an example. We're going and finding every single factor. If it doesn't jump out at you, could cause a problem. Because you'd spot the 1, you'd spot the 2. Hey, maybe you spotted 10. You may even have spotted 25. But say hypothetically you hadn't spotted that 50 goes into both of them. In this situation, you pick the highest one you saw and you divide by that. So we have 50 divided by 25 is 2. And we have how many 25s in 200? We have 8. Now, remember that check where I said, are those 2 in the same times table? You have to do it a second time just in case. So 2 and 8, are they in the same times table? And hopefully you'll go, yes, they are in the 2 times table. So you just do the exact same thing as before. You divide by 2, and you are going to get your answer of 1/4. Have a quick check. The only times table there is 1. You are finished. That last one is a really good example of why it's easier to use simplified fractions. Because if I was talking about students in S1 and I kept saying 50 out of 200, that would be much harder to work with than if I said 1/4 of S1.